Includes a $22 billion boost to testing, additional support for the hospital authority, $6 billion to buy more vaccines, and $7 billion for other anti-epidemic materials and services. Paul Chan spoke through an interpreter.
By making a concerted effort to fight the epidemic on all fronts and at full speed, we will surely win this battle against the virus. We will deploy all available resources and take all necessary measures to fully support the anti-epidemic work. The resources allocated for this cause in this budget alone involve more than $54 billion.
He says the city's economy should improve in the second half of the year, although he's not optimistic about the performance in the first quarter. Delivering his budget via video conference due to the pandemic, Paul Chan said the employment situation would deteriorate in the near future as economic activities were affected by pandemic measures. But he said the economy should improve as the situation stabilized. He forecast a growth of 2 to 3.5% for the whole year.
As long as the recent wave of the epidemic can be gradually put under control and the status of dynamic zero infection can be maintained down the road, consumption and investment demand will likely get a steam again. A stabilized epidemic situation will also create favorable conditions for the gradual and orderly resumption of quarantine-free travel between the mainland and Hong Kong, thereby injecting greater impetus into the economy.
A finance and accounting expert says he believes the consumption voucher scheme offering $10,000 to each adult resident proposed in yesterday's budget is a political move. Simon Lee, an honorary institute fellow at the Chinese University's Business School, told Joanne Wong the stimulus effect of this round of vouchers would be bigger than the one last year, given its larger value. But he said such a measure should not be encouraged.
If we look at the statistics so far, we see that last August and last October, when the first and second batch of consumption vouchers were released, there were slight increases in the retail figures for August and October. Also, when the restrictions is eased, then we see that the catering sector with monthly sales around 8 to 9 billion. When the restrictions are very strict, we see that sales figures were around 5 to 6 billion. So you can see that there is slight increase in both the sales for catering sector and the retail sector. But the economic impact is not as great as what the Finance Secretary described last year. This time, the size of the consumption voucher doubled, and I think since it's distributed after we're handling the fifth wave with all the testing completed, I think the economic impact is greater than last time, obviously.
Then why shouldn't it be encouraged?
Not because those are taxpayers' money. And then you see the government is not performing well in setting up sufficient testing center, sufficient vaccine sector for our citizens. People need to wait for a long time. I was also suffering from some of the practice. So the society feel very angry, no matter the merchants, because they need to suffer from the restriction. And also the ordinary citizens, we see that some of them, they earn less. So many unhappy faces. Distribution of consumption voucher is good, but then, it's as a result of the government force and then the government malpractice in handling the fifth wave. So the use of public money to please the citizen like that shouldn't be encouraged.
After groups calling for it for many years, finally this year, we have a new tax concession for those who are renting their own homes. So what do you think about this measure?
Now, this is a good measure, but the society has been calling for so many years. Though the annual deduction is only $100,000, it's referred to around $8,000 per month. We see that the rental expense borne by many people, many families, is double or triple on that. But it's a good start. I think the government has assessed its ability and also the reception of the society before it introduced such kinds of tax. Many people, especially young people, they cannot afford to buy the residential unit, so they rent, but they cannot get any tax advantage. So this is a kind of loophole. I think it's the right time to close this loophole. Another good measure is new legislation to prohibit the landlords from terminating the tenancy agreement of the commercial tenants. I think it's another highlight of this budget.
Do you see any impact on the rental market because of these measures?
I think because the demand is still far more than the supply, so no significant impact on that. I mean, for the residential part, because the concessions on the tax deduction for the residential unit, but those potential tenants, they may have a little bit more leeway in shopping for the suitable residential unit. Since now we have the tax deduction, so depends on the tax status, the salaries of the persons concerned, and may encourage them a little bit to rent a little bit bigger space.
That's Simon Lee from the Chinese University's Business School speaking there to Joanne Wong. The government is also looking at introducing a progressive rating system for domestic properties, so pricier flats would be subject to a higher percentage in property rates. Mr. Chan said this could better reflect the affordable users pay principle and would bring in about an extra $760 million in government revenue each year. It will also be easier for property buyers to obtain mortgages for pricier homes, enabling first-time buyers to take out a 90% loan for flats worth up to $10 million. That's $2 million more than at present. Well, will yesterday's budget be just what the doctor ordered to cure the economic ills brought about by COVID? For more on this, we're joined now by PwC Hong Kong tax partner, Agnes Wong. Good morning, Ms. Wong.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us on the program. So what do you think of the budget? Any surprises?
I think this is a better than expected budget because the original estimate was a more than 100 billion deficit, but now it revised to be 18.9 billion surplus. So it proved that actually Hong Kong still has strong financial foundation and healthy. And another area that if looking at this budget, it is a well-balanced one because it covers various measures for the individuals and the enterprise in a wide range of industries. And more importantly, right now, the most important thing is to fight the COVID. So we see the immediate measures to address the challenge under the current situation. So, and then there's good to see there's a long-term measures, the business plan. The highlight of the budget is that for the rates. This is the first time we introduce new tax system for Hong Kong. And the progressive rating system for the domestic properties will bring into additional revenue for the government. And this is not expected to have very wide-range impact on the property owners because based on the government's estimate, these impacts will be amounted to only 2%. So, and as a whole, Hong Kong revenue will largely depends on the profit tax and salary tax in the past. So the new progressive rating system will bring into a long-term, long-run income in the future.
So do you think this, you said the revamp of the rates regime is the highlight of the budget. Do you think now is a good time to introduce this because of the uncertainties in the economy?
The effective day is not within this year. So right now, because if you look at the budget, there are immediate measures to tackle, to deal with anti-epidemic efforts, to step up the efforts. You mentioned about like there will be additional 65.7 billion the additional funds to help to deal with the epidemic. So as long as this current situation is under control, Hong Kong in the second quarter, as expected by the government, it will gradually recover. And so the introduction of the progressive rating system can help to bring in the long-run income in the future.
What about on the $10,000 consumption voucher announced in the budget? How much of an impact do you think it will have on the economy?
It's based on the last year record, 5,000 consumption voucher. It really helped to stimulate the Hong Kong economy. So this year, double the amount, double the effort. So we believe this can help to increase the stronger and then more lasting boost to the local economy. And from how this will impact the financial situation, because this year, if you look at the financial budget by the government for the coming years, except for the 2022-23, we will see a deficit because of the significant spending on the anti-epidemic. In the coming 4 years, until 2026, we will see there will be consolidated surplus, so quite strong financial growth is estimated.
Now, some people like the Executive Councillor Regina Ib, she said and instead of a $10,000 consumption voucher, the government should have given $10,000 in cash. Do you think it would have been less beneficial to the economy if it was given in cash?
I think the government last year, when they introduced the 5,000 vouchers, they have think about how effective and then how wide will be the coverage for the different industry and then the different people. And so this year, to the introduction of the 10,000 voucher, because the administrative cost will be minimized, and then we see the impacts from the last year. Looking at the figure, based on the government estimate figure, there was 5% increase in the personal consumption. So as a whole, with the double these amounts, the voucher in this year, we can see can help Hong Kong to stimulate and quickly recover from as long as the epidemic can be under control.
But a $10,000 cash wouldn't be able to achieve that then.
10,000 cash. I think the government have the consultation or debate 2 years ago or last year. If it's the cash, it depends. Like some people, maybe they will just keep the cash in their pocket. So maybe I think the government, when they roll out last year using a consumption voucher, they have considered all aspects.
Right, and earlier you said you were talking about the government's financial situation, a budget surplus this year, reversing last year's forecast of a deficit, but then there's a shortfall projected next year, then 4 years of surplus. What do you think of the overall health of the public coffers going forward?
Hong Kong, the major income contribution will be the property tax, dairy tax. So as long as the current situation can be under control, we will see a steady growth in the property tax and dairy tax. And because of, in addition to the property tax and dairy tax, another two major income contribution will be the stamp duty and also the land sales. So if the overall economy is gradually recover in the second quarter, we can see that the income is estimated by the government. The operating income, operating revenue will be in the good progression and then the good growth. And the other thing probably will affect or influence the budget amount is expenditure. So if the expenditure is under good control, it's within the estimate by the government. So we can see in longer run, Hong Kong will be the financial healthy, financial wealthy.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. But thanks again for joining us this morning. That's Agnes Wong, PwC Hong Kong tax partner.
Hong Kong has posted yet another fresh high in daily COVID cases as well as deaths. Yesterday, there were over 8,600 new cases and 43 deaths, most of them elderly people. The Centre for Health Protection also said analysis of deaths showed the rate among unvaccinated people was 18 times higher than those who'd had COVID jabs. Meanwhile, 2 more designated clinics have opened to treat COVID patients with mild symptoms. Dr. Lau Kah-hin from the Hospital Authority was asked whether a surge in cases in the 2 districts had prompted authorities to locate the clinics in Yau Ma Tei and Cheung Sha Wan. He spoke through an interpreter.
We
have patients all across the territory. In considering commissioning designated clinics, we consider a number of factors such as demand as well as the conditions of the GOPCs. After all, these are confirmed patients, and if the clinic is too small in size, it will not be suitable. We need to choose larger ones with better ventilation, etc. Every day we keep watch of the figures, such as the number of patients received and the number of bookings, in coming up with the best arrangements.
7 other public clinics have taken in about 6,300 patients between them since last week, as a surge in cases of the Omicron variant left hospitals full.
Security Minister Chris Tang will be quarantined at home for 2 weeks after his wife and domestic helper came down with COVID-19. Mr. Tang, who himself tested negative, will work from home, and the Security Bureau will thoroughly cleanse and disinfect the relevant offices. Meanwhile, the Undersecretary for Innovation and Technology, David Chung, has tested preliminary positive after his driver was confirmed with the virus. The head of the IT Bureau, Alfred Sitt, has tested negative and will work from home until Saturday as a precaution. Mr. Chung is the most senior official so far to have tested positive for the virus. Federation of Trade Unions lawmaker Alice Mack has also tested preliminary positive for COVID-19. She said she started to develop mild symptoms and will keep working from home.
Well, fortunately, I have already had my 3 jabs of vaccine. I am experiencing some mild symptoms like a runny nose, coughing, and sore throat. I have started taking some Chinese medicine, and I hope these medicine can help, and I will try to rest well and to recover soon. And during this period, I will continue my work.
It's now just coming up to 22 minutes past 7 on Hong Kong Today. The United States has warned that the Russian military is now fully prepared for a large-scale invasion of Ukraine, and an attack could be imminent. President Joe Biden is to impose sanctions on the key Baltic gas pipeline Nord Stream 2 as he toughens measures against Russia. Ukraine had called for tougher sanctions to try to deter Russia from further aggression after the Kremlin recognized as independent areas of eastern Ukraine controlled by Russian-backed separatist rebels. Now, Ukraine's parliament has approved a 30-day state of emergency to come into force at midnight local time. Speaking alongside the Lithuanian and Polish leaders, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky asked for security guarantees from Russia as a step towards ending the standoff.
The fact is that today there are 150,000 Russian soldiers at our border. Those territories are temporarily occupied. Russia should be among the countries that give Ukraine concrete security guarantees. That's not a secret. I proposed multiple times to the Russian president to sit down and hold talks.
So what of the global response? In New York, there's been a special session of the United Nations General Assembly. The Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, said the world is facing a moment of peril, and that if the conflict spreads, we could see a scale and severity of need unseen for many years. There was also this from Ukraine's Foreign Minister, Dmytro Kuleba.
The beginning of a large-scale war in Ukraine will be the end of the world order as we know it. If Russia does not get a severe, swift and decisive response now, this will mean a total bankruptcy of the international security system and international institutions which are tasked with maintaining the global security order. This is a grim scenario which will throw us back to the darkest times of the 20th century. Russia will not stop at Ukraine. If a permanent member of the UN Security Council succeeds in breaking literally all rules, other actors will be inspired by him and follow his pattern.
The Russian ambassador to the UN, Vasily Nebenza, had a warning of his own.
Запад продолжает наускивать, подбадривать и вооружать Киев.
The West continues to goad and to provoke and to arm Kiev. We warn you that since at the request of Donetsk and Luhansk, this ceasefire will be monitored by the Russian armed forces, no one intends to go softly with any violators. Therefore, we urge you today to focus efforts on reining in Kiev and deterring it from conducting a new military adventure that might cost the whole of Ukraine very dearly.
It's now 24 minutes past 7 and sports is next.
Fight the virus, stay vigilant. If you think you have a higher risk of COVID-19 exposure or experience discomfort, you can collect specimen bottles for free testing from designated public clinics. Meanwhile, the government will arrange free testing for targeted groups. To minimize the risk of community transmission, we should take the initiative to get tested. Together, we must fight the virus. Stay vigilant. Visit coronavirus.gov.hk for details.
Time for another look at sports. I'm Adam Jung. We start with football. Anthony Elanga came to the rescue for Manchester United in the European Champions League. The Swedish teenager scored an 80th minute equalizer to give the English side a 1-1 draw away to Atletico Madrid in the first leg of their last 16 tie. The former Everton midfielder Leon Osman says United will be happy with the result.
For 75 minutes of this game, you felt that if Manchester United would have been able to take a 2-0 defeat back to Old Trafford, they'd have probably been pleased about it, but they hung in there. They made sure they didn't concede another goal. They were vigilant, and then Ralf Rangnick able to make substitutions, and he's able to make 3 all in one go, knowing he had backups to come, and those 3 substitutions just gave United a bit of stability and a bit of opportunity to know where to attack from. Came on with a bit more information from the sideline, and then once they were in the game, once they had a little bit more control, Elanga came on and he had real pace, he was dynamic, he always wanted to stretch the opposition, and he was the one who popped up with that opportunity and that goal that earned United a creditable 1-1 draw.
In the night's other game, Benfica made a great comeback in their 2-2 draw with Ajax. The BBC's John Bennett was watching.
Ukraine international Roman Yaremchuk came off the bench to score a deserved equaliser for Benfica after a superb second-half performance by the Portuguese side. Ajax were on top before the break. Dusan Tadic gave them the lead with a cushioned half volley. Then Champions League top scorer Sebastian Haller scored at both ends within 3 minutes, turning in a Jan Vertonghen low cross for an own goal, then making up for it when he followed up his own save shot. But Benfica piled on the pressure second half, leading to Yaremchuk's close-range header. After scoring, the Ukraine striker celebrated by taking off his Benfica top to reveal another shirt which had an emblem from his home country.
Now we turn to the English Premier League. Liverpool hammer Leeds United 6-0 at Anfield to close the gap on leaders Manchester City to 3 points. Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool also have a superior goal differential over their rivals.
We take a 6-0, obviously, but it's not that we think that's now the normal standard. So we know how difficult it is to deal with these kind of things. So there's just a challenge for us as well. It's in a moment a rather nice challenge, but it's a challenge. But we have 10 days until we play the next league game. We have 2 very important games in between. So a complete different competition.
Burnley beat Tottenham 1-0 at Turf Moor on a second-half goal from captain Ben Mee. Burnley's second win in a row puts them 2 points from safety. Watford are still in trouble. They lost 4-1 at home to Crystal Palace. In golf, Phil Mickelson is making a desperate effort to save his reputation. The 6-time major champion says he regrets his criticism of Saudi Arabia and will take a break from the game. The American was involved with the Saudi Arabian-backed Super League to gain leverage over the PGA Tour and claims his views were taken out of context. The BBC's Ian Carter says Mickelson has done plenty of damage to himself.
He says that his contracts are all on pause as it stands at the moment. KPMG, with whom he has been associated since 2008, say their deal with him has ended by mutual consent. So there is significant fallout. He's taking himself out of the limelight. Will we see this 3 times Masters champion playing at Augusta in April? There must be a huge doubt over that now. And as I say, he does appear rather damaged goods, very damaged goods in terms of his reputation and golfing career right now.
And we finish with NHL hockey and a couple of games decided in extra time. Patrick Laine scored in overtime as the Columbus Blue Jackets took down the Toronto Maple Leafs 4-3. The Leafs have dropped 3 in a row. And in the West, the resurgent Anaheim Ducks got past the San Jose Sharks 4-3 in a shootout. And that's your look at sports.
Thanks, Adam. Now the weather forecast. Cold with cloudy intervals to start with. Mainly fine and dry later with a top temperature of around 16 degrees. Winds moderate north to northeasterlies. Forecasters say it will be mainly fine with temperatures rising gradually in the next couple of days. Sunny intervals early to midweek next week. 11 degrees right now. Relative humidity 79%. It's now 7:30 with a news summary. Here's Andrew Shirovsky.
The Financial Secretary, Paul Chan, has acknowledged that the rates reform announced in yesterday's budget strikes a blow against wealthy landlords who are making a living renting out luxury homes. And he says it's a first step towards sharing the benefits of economic success. The reforms will mean more expensive properties attract proportionally higher rates bills. People who own multiple homes will be able to claim rate relief on only one. At a televised forum, Mr. Chan was asked whether his plans aligned with Beijing's push for common prosperity.
In the budget, we spoke about why we want economic development. It's about raising the living standards of all people. We also mentioned how we can share our economic development in a fairer way. The principle that those who can afford it should pay is one of the ways to achieve that. And this progressive rates reform is only the first step.
There's been a mixed reaction to another signature policy delivered by the Financial Secretary in his budget, a $10,000 consumption voucher handout for every resident. Mr. Chan said the scheme, which will cost $66 billion, will help stimulate the economy. The New People's Party chairwoman, Regina Ip, says the government should have offered cash handouts instead of consumption vouchers.
Given that the social restriction measures will be extended to 20th April, and under the one-off unemployment support scheme, which we approved last week, people can only start applying in mid-March for 10K. And if they're going to be laid off until 20th April or suffer heavy income loss, giving them 10K cash is better than 10K e-consumption vouchers. Because if you use consumption vouchers, basically you are benefiting octopus, retail and restaurants. And a lot of our people actually need money to pay rent or pay other expenses.
Overseas, President Biden is to impose sanctions on a key Baltic gas pipeline, Nord Stream 2, as he toughens measures against Russia over its stance on Ukraine. The sanctions will target the company and its corporate officers. Earlier, Ukraine called for tougher sanctions to try to deter Russia from further aggression. A State Department spokesman, Ned Price, said in addition to previous sanctions, the U.S. had responded swiftly.
Our German allies, yesterday, took resolute action to ensure that the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, what had been a prized $11 billion investment on the part of the Russian Federation, is suspended indefinitely. And as you have just seen, President Biden today authorized sanctions on Nord Stream 2 AG and its corporate office holders. We have now taken complementary action using our own authorities to ensure that Nord Stream 2 is off the table, just as we said it would be.
The news from RTHK.
Thanks to Andrew Shirovsky in our newsroom. This is Hong Kong Today with Janice Wong and me, Vicky Wong. Still to come in the final half hour, we'll hear reaction from the Internet Professional Association after funding for tech companies is given a boost. There's a warning over the humanitarian crisis in Yemen.
We have a ring of fire literally around the world right now, and Yemen is right in the middle of it. We're feeding, as we speak, 13 million people. Out of that, 8 million are now at half rations because we don't have the money.
And a 250-kilogram burglar causes havoc in the US.
But first, the Financial Secretary Paul Chan has unveiled a $170 billion budget, including consumption vouchers for all, progressive tax breaks, and rental relief for small businesses. Delivering his speech via video conference to lawmakers, the financial chief set aside $54 billion to fund Hong Kong's anti-epidemic efforts as the SAR battles its worst wave of COVID-19 infections yet. Topping the list of a basket of sweeteners was another round of the electronic spending vouchers, doling out $10,000 to each adult Hong Kong resident. But not everyone was impressed. Joanne Wong reports.
This will be twice the amount people get to spend compared with last year's vouchers. All adult Hong Kong residents will be receiving the first $5,000 installment via electronic payment systems in April, and the rest in the middle of the year. That's the same time that an additional 300,000 people who are believed to be newly eligible for the handout will get their vouchers. Financial Secretary Paul Chan hopes the scheme will step up economic recovery and further encourage the public and businesses to use electronic payment, which will promote the development of digital economy. But fresh questions have been raised about the voucher scheme. New People's Party lawmaker Regina Ip believes the government should instead offer a cash handout of $10,000, especially for those who've lost their jobs or suffered a sharp drop in income amid the pandemic.
Giving them 10K cash is better than 10K e-consumption vouchers, because if you use consumption vouchers, basically you are benefiting octopus, retail and restaurants. And a lot of our people actually need money to pay rent or pay other expenses.
Simon Lee, an honorary institute fellow for Chinese University's business school, said he considered the launch of the new round of vouchers as more of a political move.
The government performed so poorly in handling the fifth wave. So it's just a kind of gesture to please the community. I don't think this practice should be encouraged.
DAB lawmaker Holden Chow said the vouchers should be made available only when businesses reopen.
Right now, we are still having a lot of restrictions. I think the government should really be cautious about the timing of giving out these consumption vouchers and make sure that these vouchers could be effective in boosting the economy.
DAB lawmaker Holden Chow ending that report by Joanne Wong. The government's finances for this financial year are surprisingly back in the black for the first time in the past 3 years. But the Financial Secretary is budgeting for another deficit in the coming year, although a relatively smaller one. Violet Wong reports.
In budgeting for the financial year that's now coming to a close, Paul Chan projected a deficit of over $100 billion. But he's now forecasting a surplus of $18.9 billion for the 2021 to 22 year. The Financial Secretary said that's because revenues from land premium and profits tax are more than $43 billion and $32 billion higher than the estimates, while the government's operating expenditure was nearly $19 billion lower than he forecast in last year's budget. He said the fiscal reserves are expected to be $946.7 billion by the end of next month, similar to the levels when this government's term began 5 years ago. For the coming financial year, Mr. Chan is budgeting for government expenditure to outstrip revenues by more than $56 billion. But the FS expects Hong Kong's economy to improve in the second half of the year, after a first quarter performance over which he admits he's not optimistic. He expects unemployment to grow in the near future, as economic activity is hit by the government's anti-epidemic work. But he said the $6.6 billion earmarked for jobs in the anti-epidemic fund should create some 30,000 time-limited positions. Mr. Chan also said the economy should improve as COVID infections are brought under control.
As long as the recent wave of the epidemic can be gradually put under control and the status of dynamic zero infection can be maintained down the road, consumption and investment demand will likely get a steam again. A stabilized epidemic situation will also create favorable conditions for the gradual and orderly resumption of quarantine-free travel between the mainland and Hong Kong, thereby injecting greater impetus into the economy.
The Financial Secretary is forecasting growth of 2 to 3.5% for 2022.
Violet Wong reporting. The Financial Secretary says the government will inject $10 billion into the Future Fund to support businesses with development potential. Half of the money will go towards a new fund known as the Strategic Tech Fund, identifying tech companies deemed of strategic value. The remaining $5 billion will be allocated to a new fund called the GBA Investment Fund. The president of the Internet Professional Association, Mickelson, welcomed the plan. He said the funding would give startup companies in Hong Kong a big boost amid the pandemic. He spoke to Jimmy Choi.
I think we very welcome the Financial Secretary initiative to set up a 10 billion fund, of which 5 billion would go to the Strategic Tech Fund and the other half would go to the GBA investments. For the Strategic Tech Fund, I particularly think is very helpful in a way that it is a much bigger impact than in the previous setup. For example, I sit on the board of Cyberport, so I know in our macro fund, which is something Cyberport proud of, and to invest in communities, startup companies, it is of a size of 400 million Hong Kong dollars. And Science Park has a similar fund, which is $600 million, so all in is 1 billion. So compared to this 5 billion Strategic Tech Fund, it is a big jump from the previous setup. I think this is handy at a time like this. So after the impact of COVID, and although there are rental reliefs from time to time, but actually by cutting costs is not something most important. By having investment by government and by injecting more capital to these startups, I think this is big endorsement, and that will really help them. So I think this is a very good news. I really think it is very useful.
A question about the subsidy for startups set up by universities. The minister said he will double the amount of the subsidy to $16 million. Do you think that's enough as an incentive for these startups?
I think you refer to the tissue. That is from 8 million to 16 million per university per year. So this is a good step forward. But if you ask me, if it is 1.5 million per deal, so roughly is 10 to 11 deals a year. For a university that is very sizable, I think the top university in Hong Kong may have more than 10 startups being incubated, or much more than 10 startups being incubated. So I think that will be a tight amount of fundings to be given. So that will mean some kind of selection process. That will mean some kind of competition. So, but it is going to the right direction. And also, don't forget, there is also the private sector participation on a one-to-one basis, right? So all in all, I think that will give a startup a little head start, sort of the first angel or pre-angel round money. And it is also an endorsement as well, because it's from the university that they have association with. And I think this is a good start. But to be honest, if it is this amount may not be under the Hong Kong standard of living, also the cost of running a startup, I think this is not a lot of money, to be honest. So I think that startups also need to raise monies and capitals from other channels from time to time.
And also the Financial Secretary also said he will set up a new committee to drive the development of digital economy in Hong Kong. So what is digital economy, and how can Hong Kong play a bigger role in it? And also, do you think that the committee will really help achieving that goal?
I think you refer to the Digital Economy Development Committee, right? So that is something I think the Financial Secretary, for the first time, mentioned it in his report. So I think that digital economy means a lot of things, including smart city, including sort of innovation and technology enhancement in the whole city, and getting more jobs created and all that. So I think, and also STEM possibly also being promoted. So I think this is a pretty wide innovation and technology promotion. So this committee will include scholars, according to him, and also industry elites, government officials, and experts, etc., etc. So the key is, I think, to allow well-respected people to join this committee. Has to be carefully selected. And also, I would like to say they shouldn't be a rubber stamp. they should be doing the right job to give the government right advice. To the extent that the advice are executable, the government should really, really consider it. So in the past, I think because we have different rules, so a lot of policies cannot really easily execute it if it is crossing different rules. In particular, digital economy is a very wide aspect. If it is under the financial secretary, I believe this is a very high level and easier than before to execute right ideas by these experts committee members.
That was Hendrik Sin, the president of the Internet Professional Association, speaking to Jimmy Choi. The government has imposed tougher rules on the use of masks while people are exercising outdoors. Tighter social distancing measures also take effect today, with only 2 people allowed to dine at a table in Type D restaurants, as well as the vaccine pass system taking effect. Damon Pang reports.
From today, people have to wear a mask when they're in country parks or exercising outdoors. Eating or drinking will be banned on all public transport, including ferries and kaito vessels, and passengers will have to keep their masks on at all times. Restrictions on dining in will be further tightened, with 2 people allowed per table, down from 4 previously. Other existing curbs, such as limiting cross-family gatherings and shutting down premises such as gyms and bars, will continue. The government has said it plans to keep the distancing measures in place until April the 20th. Today also sees the start of the vaccine pass scheme, under which people will need to use the Leave Home Safe app and have at least 1 jab to enter various types of premises, including shopping malls, supermarkets and restaurants.
Damon Pang reporting. Hong Kong has posted yet another fresh high in daily COVID cases as well as deaths. The government has also issued compulsory testing notices for 21 locations, mostly on Kowloon side. It's also opened more designated clinics to help those who are infected. Jimmy Choi reports.
Health officials say there were 8,674 new coronavirus cases. All but 3 were local infections. They also reported 43 deaths, 24 of them in the past day, most involving elderly people. 19 people died on Sunday and Monday, but there was a delay in reporting the cases. To better address the medical needs of COVID patients, 2 more designated clinics opened today in Yau Ma Tei and Cheung Sha Wan, raising the total number to 9. Dr. Lau Kin Hin from the hospital authority says when it comes to locations, the factors they took into consideration include the conditions of general outpatient clinics or GOPCs. He spoke through an interpreter.
We have patients all across the territory. In considering commissioning designated clinics, we consider a number of factors such as demand as well as the conditions of the GOPCs. After all, these are confirmed patients, and if the clinic is too small in size, it will not be suitable. We need to choose larger ones with better ventilation, etc.
And Dr. Chuang Shuk-kwan of the Center for Health Protection said after officials analyzed certain deaths in the current Omicron outbreak, the death rate among unvaccinated patients was 0.54%. That's 18 times of those who have been jabbed. Dr. Chuang again appealed to people to get vaccinated against the virus. The centre's controller, Dr. Edwin Choi, said people who test positive for COVID are starting to receive an SMS that comes with an electronic form. He's urged COVID patients to fill in that form as soon as possible to enable health authorities to arrange admission to isolation facilities and contact tracing.
It's now 13 minutes to 8 on Hong Kong Today. President Joe Biden has once again upped pressure on Russia, saying he'll impose sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. This follows a day of heightened rhetoric from the Ukrainian president, who has brought in a state of emergency. The United States seems to think we're closer to seeing President Vladimir Putin order Russian troops to invade Ukraine. John Kirby is the Pentagon spokesman.
Without speaking to specific timing, because only Mr. Putin knows what the timing is here. What I would tell you is that we continue to see him form his capabilities in such a way that leads us to believe that we are potentially close to some sort of action. Again, what that action is going to be and exactly on what timeline, we can't be sure. But what we see is that they are ready.
In the past few hours, the Kremlin has said separatist leaders in the two breakaway republics of eastern Ukraine, Donetsk and Luhansk, have asked Mr. Putin to help them. But Mr. Putin has said he remains open to diplomacy. He made the comments to mark a public holiday called Defender of the Fatherland Day.
Our country is always open to a direct and honest dialogue to search for diplomatic solutions to the most difficult problems. But I repeat, the interests of Russia, the security of our citizens are unconditional for us. Therefore, we will continue to develop and improve the Army and the Navy to ensure that their efficiency increases so that they are equipped with the latest technology.
But where and how that Russian military will next be deployed is the key question. Addressing the UN General Assembly, Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba had this warning.
No one will be able to sit out this crisis if President Putin decides that he can move forward with his aggression against Ukraine. Your governments and your people will face painful consequences together with our government and our people. This is why we need to use this last chance for action and stop Russia where it is. It is clear that President Putin will not stop by himself.
One of the more striking pronouncements of the day came from the Ukrainian government, urging its citizens inside Russia to leave the country. This woman describes what it's like living in Russia and says she has no plans to leave.
As you know, really a lot of Ukrainians are living in Russia, and not for any political reasons or for something like that. We have families here, we have relatives, and I'm married to a Russian man. That's why I cannot just live a life here and leave. I would really love to maybe leave for other country, maybe even not Ukraine because of the war state and everything, but it's not really possible. And it's really scary. We're all worried and anxious about that, but I'm still me, and I think a lot of people here are still wishing, hoping, praying for that to be over, for our government to stop all this invasion and all this mess that they have done in the previous few days.
The World Food Programme has warned that 8 million Yemenis are at risk of losing all humanitarian aid next month because of a lack of funding. Yemen has been at war since 2014 when Iran-backed Houthi rebels seized control of large parts of the country. Despite the rebels and the government signing a power-sharing agreement to end the conflict in 2019, war continues. 130,000 people have been killed in conflict, with tens of thousands more estimated to have died from lack of food, health services and infrastructure. The head of the UN's World Food Programme, David Beasley, says multiple humanitarian crises around the world are threatening the aid effort in Yemen.
2 years ago, right before COVID hit, there was 135 million people marching towards starvation. When COVID hit, it created an economic ripple effect all around the world. And couple that with climate extremes and then extra conflict like you see in Ethiopia, and then Afghanistan, and of course now Ukraine's knocking on the door. We have a ring of fire literally around the world right now, and Yemen is right in the middle of it. We're feeding, as we speak, 13 million people. Out of that, 8 million are now at half rations because those 8 million will be cut to 0 rations in a few weeks if we don't have a miracle very, very soon. The systems in place to deliver the food, we do that. We know how to do that. We just need the money. It's just that simple. And if we don't get the money, people are going to die, and millions will.
Rio Tinto, the world's second largest mining company, has posted record earnings of more than $20 billion after a year of soaring commodity prices and strong demand in China. Here's the BBC's Jonathan Josephs.
Soaring demand for iron ore, which is mainly used to make steel, as well as other commodities such as aluminium and copper, have driven these record-breaking numbers. Rio Tinto has benefited from inflation pushing prices up as the global economy continues to realign supply and demand after the disruption of the pandemic. Nonetheless, strong demand is a sign of a recovery, with China leading the way.
Police in the United States are trying to catch an unusual suspect who's broken into more than 30 homes in Northern California. The serial intruder is a large black bear named Hank, as the BBC's Harry Bly explains.
The massive black bear with an appetite for human food.
The debate over what to do with a giant black bear in South Lake Tahoe continues.
Meet public enemy number one in California's...
He's known as Hank the Tank and weighs a whopping 227 kilograms. He's been making headlines in California and beyond because for months he's been breaking into people's homes and garages in South Lake Tahoe and eating their food. It's winter in North America right now, but Hank's gluttony means he's skipping hibernation. But what to do about the bear has divided opinion in the community. On one hand, some locals are worried. They don't like the idea of a large bear roaming around the neighbourhood looking for food. Local authorities have already set traps to catch him and have said euthanizing Hank remains an option because the bear has grown so comfortable around humans. I'm
tired of having to fear our lives, quite frankly, because of what a bear may or may not do.
We have to be able to protect our children, and we have to be able to walk out of our house.
On the other hand, many want Hank's life to be spared, and Bryant is one of those people.
I'm the executive director of the Bear League. We educate people and we answer a 24/7 hotline for people to call us if they have questions or concerns or problems with bears.
Anne says Hank doesn't pose a threat.
No, he's not dangerous. He's very gentle and sweet, and he never has been a threat. He just never bothered anybody other than going in their kitchen and eating everything in their refrigerator. Most people care very deeply about him, and even though he's been an inconvenience, they don't want him to be killed. They don't want him to die.
In fact, Anne says that several people in the community are actively preventing Hank being trapped, fearing he'll be killed.
The neighborhood people who care about Hank guarded the traps and sabotaged the traps and spray painted the traps and didn't let the bear go in.
The Bear League says Hank should be sent to a sanctuary away from the public, where he can live his life in peace, with plenty of space to roam and food to eat.
That's the BBC's Harry Bly. Coming up next here on Hong Kong Today, more sport.
With the Stay Home Safe scheme, epidemic prevention resources can be reserved for the needy, and we can protect our healthcare system. If you are suitable for home quarantine, stay home at all times during the quarantine period. Monitor your health condition, conduct regular tests, and observe the home quarantine guidelines. Call the hotline 1-833-019 if you need help. Let's do our part. With our concerted efforts, Hong Kong will overcome the epidemic.
Time for our last look at sports. I'm Adam Jung. We start with football in the English Premier League, where Liverpool have taken another step closer to the top. They hammered Leeds United 6-0 at Anfield to close the gap on leaders Manchester City to 3 points. The lopsided result also gave Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool a better goal difference than City.
We take a 6-0, obviously, but it's not that we think that's now the normal standard. So we know how difficult it is to deal with these kind of things. So there's just a challenge for us as well. It's in a moment a rather nice challenge, but it's a challenge. But we have 10 days until we play the next league game. We have 2 very important games in between. So a complete different competition.
Burnley beat Tottenham 1-0 at Turf Moor on a second-half goal from captain Ben Mee. Burnley's second win in a row puts them 2 points from safety. Watford are still in trouble. They lost 4-1 at home to Crystal Palace. Now to the Champions League, where Anthony Elanga came to the rescue for Manchester United. The Swedish teenager scored an 80th minute equalizer to give the English side a 1-1 draw away to Atletico Madrid in the first leg of their last 16 tie. The former Everton midfielder Leon Osman says United will be happy with the result.
For 75 minutes of this game, you felt that if Manchester United would have been able to take a 2-0 defeat back to Old Trafford, they'd have probably been pleased.